Alright guys, today we're going to be reacting to crazy facts about IQ and race, the last of which is you never know. Let's jump in.
Racial fallacies. Now, in this section, in this chapter on racial fallacies, you begin, almost all of this book is addressed to the current moment. But in racial fallacies, you start by going back about 100 years to lay out the progressive position in the 1910s and 20s, and for some years afterward. I'm quoting you. In addressing the massive increase in immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe, this massive increase in immigration begins toward the end of the 19th century and carries on through the 1920s. In addressing the massive increase in immigration, progressives claimed that these new immigrants were inherently, genetically, and therefore permanently inferior.
Dang, that's a very strong statement. Wow, really?
So your argument is that a century or so ago, progressives believed roughly the same about Polish and Italian immigrants that whites in the South had long believed about blacks.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Wow.
Social justice fallacies. I'm going to read a quotation, then I'd like you to take us through this material. With the passing years, more and more evidence undermined the conclusion of the genetic determinists. Jews who had scored low on the 1917 Army mental test began to score above the national average on various tests as they became a more English-speaking group. A study showed that black orphans raised by white families had significantly higher average IQs than other black children, close quote.
Wow, that's very interesting. That is very interesting. And man, how can I just put this into perspective? So you're telling me that culture has more effect than genetics aspects? I believe so. I believe so.
So in the century since this, you call them genetic determinists, which is one way of putting it. They were racist. They believed that some races were permanently inferior.
Yes, and should be eliminated.
And we've learned that's total nonsense. But even more than that, we've learned that IQ is malleable. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you mean by malleable.
Well, that is to say that this ranking of
the ranking changes.
Jews
radically.
are stupid in 1917 because they score badly on tests, but they start
on tests written in English.
Tests written in English. Okay.
And people who spoke English did better on those tests.
Or that blacks have a certain fixed IQ ranking, and then you have black orphans raised by white families. In other words, a different cultural.
But even before that study wasn't done until 1976.
Oh, that's a late
But even as of the time of World War I, the data show that black soldiers scored below white soldiers. And this is one of the reasons it's so that you need people with contrary opinions to be able to be free to attack things. The people who believe that this was genetically determined, they said, that's it, that's the answer, and they moved on. Some other people said, let's look at it more closely. And they discovered that black soldiers from New York, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and one or two other states scored higher than white soldiers from Mississippi, Alabama, et cetera, et cetera.
That is interesting, man. Mom, I mean, the South has always been kind of freaky, right? Back then. Now it's much better. But back then, you can hear some of these stories about how the white people in the South were kind of slow, I would say. But it likes everything, right? But as soon some structures was implemented, things started getting better.
And as I mentioned in the book, people's genes do not change when they cross a state line. The problem is when you have people who are crusading for some idea, whatever the idea is, and they find some data that fits what they believe, that's the end of the story as far as they're concerned, which is fine if there are other people with contrary ideas who will look closer for something that goes the other way.
And then get listened to.
Yes, yes.
By the way, you describe in the book the Flynn effect, discovered by your friend, the late James Flynn. Can you describe that? That's fascinating.
Well, the idea of the genetic determinist is that you had to rid the country of these inferior races, because otherwise the national IQ would go down over time, because the poorer people had more children than the richer people. And so that went on. Here again, the IQ data there that the genetic determinists were relying on looked like it supported what they said. But Jim Flynn decided that, well, first of all, you have to understand what an IQ score, how an IQ score is arrived at. Whatever number of questions answered correctly is the average at a given time, is given the number 100. Because when you do these tests, especially with children, if a 6-year-old child scores the same as a 12-year-old child, that means the 6-year-old child is either much brighter than usual, or the 12-year-old child is a lot less than usual. And so you compare all the 6-year-old children, and whatever the 6-year-old children, how many questions they answer correctly, that becomes 100. And then similarly for all the other ages.
Right.
So you can do that. And an adulthood, at some point, you simply say adult and non-adult.
Right.
All right. Now that sounds very, very, very innocent in itself, but what happens when people start answering more questions correctly than before?
Start going deeper and
Next
deeper and deeper and deeper, and all of a sudden, we are confronting all the situations, right?
Generation answers more questions. Now the number of questions answered by the second generation becomes 100. And so over time, as more and more people, black, white, and whatever, are answering more and more questions correctly, the tests are renormed.
Oh.
So having an IQ of 100 in 1925 is not the same thing as having an IQ of 100 in 1935
That
or
is
1950.
funny. That is so interesting, huh? That is so interesting.
And this is exactly what was going on.
Yes.
People of all different kinds were
Yes,
getting smarter, to put it crudely.
But once Jim Flynn decided to go back to the raw data, not just take the IQs. How many questions was this? And he discovers that the number of questions being answered correctly was increasing by large amounts, roughly one statistical deviation,
Right.
from one generation to the next.
Which is big.
Yes, and so the number of questions that blacks were answering, say around 2,000, and having an IQ of 85 would have been an IQ of 104 back in 1947.
Wow, that is impressive. Well, you know what's funny? That's interesting to say, because, and you can tell by technology. We have a lot of technology. We have a lot of information coming in very fast. That might be one of the reasons why the IQ might be a little bit higher than back then. Also, the IQ in itself, right? There's tactics, not tactic, but there's training where you can increase your IQ. But increasing IQ is not easy. It does requires a lot of work, because again, the brain in itself is a muscle. You can train your muscle to become stronger. So it's the same with the brain.
And so all this information was being ignored, because people took the IQ test as if that was the fixed number of questions I answered correctly.
And so you take the lid off that one. The Flynn effect
shows that the opposite was happening. That instead of the national IQ going down, it was going up.
It was going up. And so we have this fascinating discovery that somehow or other the conditions of modern life that requires more abstract thinking,
Yes.
somehow it's bringing in...
The whole group is rising.
The whole group is rising. All right. All right. From the progressive position a century ago to the progressive position today, racial assertions have ranged from the genetic determinism that we just discussed, which proclaimed that race is everything as an explanation of group differences, to the opposite view that racism
Yes.
is the primary explanation of group differences.
Yes.
How did this happen?
Oh, it happened because a lot of people arrived at the same conclusion, and they had high IQs and PhDs, and that was the end of the story as far as many people were concerned.
All right.
I mean, a high IQ and low information is a very dangerous combination.
Wow. A high IQ and low information is a very dangerous combination. A high IQ individual with low information is a very dangerous combination. Why? That's. Oof. I should put that in my wall. Wow.
Another quote from Thomas Sowell: "The word racism is like ketchup. It can be put on practically anything, and demanding evidence makes you a racist." If high IQ and low information is a dangerous combination,
Yeah.
then it's scary to think that Ivy League universities recruit the highest IQ and give them the lowest information,
Wow.
particularly as pertains to society and the interest of people. But let me know what you think about this in the comments below. If you
Very good video. Wow. Shout out to Thomas Sowell, man, the American icon. American icon. Wow, that was very nice. Well, IQ is very important because it's just the level of information that the individual can just process and analyze, right? And how strong the brain can retain that information and put into practical analysis. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I would love to hear you guys' opinion. I'll see you in the next one.